Hey everybody, happy Saturday. Hannah here. I decided to do a live stream with you guys. It's been quite a while since I have done one. I did a post on my Facebook page a couple weeks ago asking what questions do people have about van life, traveling with my pets, situations I've encountered, or just really anything in general that I could answer. And I got quite a few good questions from some of my friends. So thank you to everybody who did share a question with me. And I'm going to answer all of these now. I figured the easiest way to do it would just be to go live and have everything right here on this video rather than editing a video later, which my friend Deanna does for me. Thank you, Deanna. So less work for her since it's mostly just me talking. All right, let's dive into it. Hopefully, the audio is good now. As you guys can see, I'm back in my apartment in Monterey. And when I've recorded videos here before, I know the audio quality was not that great. Also, before I didn't have air conditioning, so I had my windows open all the time. There's a lot of background noise. So, hopefully, you guys can hear me okay today. All right, the first story that someone asked me to share was the story of Chico and how did I find him? Like, how did he get adopted? Basically, his whole story. So Chico is a street dog that I rescued here in Mexico, and he recently got rehomed 1.5 years later with his new family in New York, which is one of my students, Ruth. She's a lovely lady, and her family, they live in the countryside in New York. So he has a big yard, and he is now an only dog. He shares the house with two cats, which he's always very good with cats. So he seems to be very, very happy. He's been with them more than a month now. But Chico first showed up in my life when Campana, one of my newly rescued dogs, came into heat for the first time. And we had already made an appointment for her to get spayed, but she came into heat a few weeks before that. So, of course, all the male dogs were coming around. And Chico was one of them. So I just started seeing him more and more out in the street. Like every time I would go for walks, I would see him there. And then at first, he was like really standoffish. He didn't want anything to do with me. Of course, I wanted to pet him. And so after some time of me trying to pet him and him realizing like, oh, she's actually doesn't have any bad intentions and isn't going to hurt me, he did warm up to me and he'd get in my lap. He came in the van with me. And so he kind of just started like hanging around. So I just decided, oh, well, what's one more? I'll go ahead and just get him neutered and get his medical stuff taken care of, and I'll foster him. It was always my intention to have Chico as a foster, even though he is such a good dog. He's so smart. He's so well behaved. But honestly, like I already have a lot of animals, and I wanted to help him. I knew that he would make somebody very happy because he was a wonderful little dog, but I knew that that person wasn't going to be me. So, yep, took him in, got him neutered, got him a collar with my ID, with my phone number on it, all that good stuff. A few weeks later, I am somewhere around my van. I don't remember if I'm inside or I don't know, nearby or something. And somebody comes over and asks me, like, hey, do you have a little white dog in your van? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, oh, that's my dog. I'm like, what? And they're like, yeah, that's my dog. And I'm like, and at this point, I've already had him for multiple weeks. He's neutered. He's got an orange collar, and I'm just like what? How? What's happening now? Because I was still, in the neighborhood where I adopted Chico, living in my van for a while, and so I was like really confused, and I was just like, oh, okay. So I like opened the door. Chico runs out. He sees the man. He's like very excited. He goes home with the man, and I say like, okay, I guess we'll just see what happens. Not even 30 minutes later, I'm not even kidding you. I'm sitting in my van and I hear on the van door, open it up. There's Chico. So, of course, he came back. So I say, oh, okay. So, anyways, I see the man from time to time and I start talking with him. And the man tells me basically that he doesn't want to keep Chico tied up because he doesn't think that that's right. And he sees that Chico wants to be with me. So I guess that's okay. He can tell that Chico's happy. I'm taking good care of him. I tell him, oh, yeah, Chico likes to snuggle with me all night. He's spoiled rotten and everything like that. And the man had a bunch of other dogs too. And anyways, so long story short, after a few more weeks, I asked the man, hey, is it okay if I adopt Chico? Now, I knew that I was going to be rehoming him, but rather than explain that whole situation, plus that ended up being like a year and a half later, I just asked the man if he will give Chico to me. And he said yes, even though Chico was already living with me full time at that point. But whenever I would see the man pass by, because I think he would be walking home from work, and occasionally I would see him, I would let Chico out. Chico would go home with him. Less than 30 minutes later, he'd be back at the van. So that's kind of Chico's story. And Ruth was very patient, waited for Chico for, like I said, a year and a half until I could finally transport him to the US. I had made several plans to go to the US in my van at different points over the last year and a half, and they always got canceled for different reasons. And finally, I made it to the US in the van this year, 2022, in was it yeah, end of May, early June, I made it up there. So I finally was able to hand Chico off. So he got to have a little one on one road trip with me. As we made our way up, we met in Pennsylvania since Ruth lives in New York, but I was going to Pennsylvania to visit my grandfather anyway. So we met up, passed Chico off. I think the first couple of days were a little stressful for him as he tried to figure out what was happening. But once he got home, he settled in right away. And she sends me pictures of him like asleep on her husband's lap in front of the TV and stuff like that. So he seems like he's really happy. They have some cute like dress up photos where they did a little tea party, and yeah, he seems really really happy. So that's kind of the Chico's story. Someone else asked me to share the story of Seni. This is a misadventure. Okay, so Seni Sienta is a cat that I adopted off the street of Mexico. She was living with the family of three dogs, and when I first saw her, I pulled her out from under the car and I held her, and she started purring right away. And I said, "All right, come on." So she came to live with me, and at first, Seni was really not happy being an indoor cat because obviously she'd been an outdoor cat her entire life. She's probably at least like six. She's an older cat. And so she would go to the front door every day, meow, 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 meow. Always wanted to go out. But I didn't want to let her out because I didn't want her to run away and get hit by a car or anything like that. So I tried to put her out with like a harness on, but she would always slip out of it. And then she would just be like under the neighbor's car, you know? But I still didn't like that. That was when I lived in an apartment. Then, when she got spayed at the vet, she got spayed and she had a hernia. So the vet took care of the hernia at the same time. And the next morning, there's like this meow outside of my apartment, and it was Seni. She was supposed to be at the vet. She had like these tubes in her side to take away like the fluid from the hernia surgery. She literally just got spayed. So I contact the vet. I'm like, what happened? And they were like, "Oh, I'm so sorry." And they checked their footage. She was all night, like at these metal bars on the cage, like trying to open it. Finally got one open, climbed up a bunch of stuff, opened a window, jumped all the way down, and then from there walked to my house, which is only like a block away. But I guess she now knew where it was. So that was like, okay, I guess she wants to be with me to recover. I guess that's what we'll do. So then we knew Sandy was an escape artist. She never liked to be in her crates. She always tried to like open it or different cloth carriers that I had. So when I started traveling in the van, the very first place I went was La Huasteca, the national park, just like 30 minutes from here. And I camped out at what's now a friend's house. And I had Senny in the van, and she jumped out of the van as soon as I got there. And the friend has several dogs, and they chased Senny up into a tree. They chased my other cats up into a tree too. Well, that first night before I went to bed, I tried to get Senny down. I tried to grab her, but she didn't want. So I just said, okay, I'll just, get her in the morning. In the morning, Senny was nowhere to be found. Nowhere. I looked everywhere. My other two cats were still there. Nowhere, nowhere, nowhere. Called for her. I asked the people I was staying with, showed photos. I looked everywhere on their property and nowhere. Well, I still put out like her litter and things like that to try and like attract her scent. And I stayed there for a couple of days. Nothing. Not a sign of her. Nothing at all. So I just said, well, hopefully she turns up. So about once a week, I would text them and say, like, hey, any sign of Senny? Nothing. Okay, I continue with my travels in the van. A few months later, and let me tell you, during this time, the temperatures got below freezing a couple of nights. And I felt terrible. I thought to myself, oh, I screwed up. Like, Cindy's probably dead. She's probably was struggling for so long. Like, how could she survive this? Like, I'll never know what happened to her, right? A few months later, I get a message and they say, yes, I have your gray cat. I thought it was Angeline because when I camp, I let the cats in and out of the van. And so I thought it was somewhere like where I was camping and someone was just telling me, like, oh, yeah, your cat's here. So I say, oh, okay, where are you? And they said Nogales. And I was like, you mean in Santa Catarina? And they're like, yeah. And at this point, I'm like 8 to 10 hours south of there. And I'm like, can you send me a picture of her? They sent me a picture. She had her collar on with my phone number on the ID tag, which is a miracle that it stayed on. And she was super skinny, but she was alive. And I couldn't believe it. I was so grateful that they contacted me. And they said she just showed up at their house and she finally let them get close enough to her. They were feeding her hot dogs. So anyway, I asked one of my friends who has a place in Santa if he can pick her up and bring her to the vet the next day because he works next to the vet. So he picked her up in his motorcycle in a backpack. Poor Cindy. But I guess at that point she was probably just relieved to, I don't know. Well, maybe she was probably scared, to be honest. Anyways, so he picks Cindy up and he brings her back, and so she goes to the vet, and she was very happy to see the vet. Like, she definitely remembered them. She didn't like the vet before, and I reminded them, like, please make sure her cage is really, really secure. I'll be there this weekend. So a couple of days later, I drove up there. I picked her up. She was happy to see me. She was happy to come home. The other cats were happy to see her. And she never wants to go outside ever since then. We've been traveling again in the van. She just stays in the van. She does not go out of the van. She stays there. She's very happy to be in the van and in the apartment. And she's gained some weight back. The vet checked her and said, like, she's completely healthy. There's nothing wrong with her. She's just lost weight. So, okay. So, yeah, so she's doing really well now. She actually has like a lot of energy now. She's much more playful. So she's actually doing like really, really well now. And I sent some money to the man that found her as a thank you. And he was really happy. So I have the feeling that he didn't have much. So I really appreciated him. So that's Sunny's story, how I never thought I would see her again. Let's see. I got a question about how do I manage with the pets in the van. So I imagine that question is probably about like there's a lot of pets in a small space. How do I manage that? I will say that the animals and like the point of the van is not to be in the van. The point of the van is a way to accomplish my goal of being outside all the time and being in nature and hiking and traveling and camping and having a lot of adventures. So we usually slow travel. We usually spend 1 to 2 weeks in each location, and we spend all day outside unless there's bad weather. So as soon as the sun comes up, we're outside. Usually the cats sleep in the van during the day, and usually at night they like to go out. The dogs are outside all day with me. I bring them inside the van at night for sleeping. So we have plenty of space. We're out in nature or at a campground or wherever we happen to be camping. And then, so they're only in the van on travel days, which I don't drive that far. Like, it's not like I'm multiple days in a row driving every single day, all day. Like, it's like I'll drive 4 hours once a week or something. So they're only in the van on those days, on bad weather days, and then at night. And then how I manage it? Well, last year I was really poor, so I didn't have money for crates, but now everybody has crates. So we travel in crates. The dogs go in crates at night. That helps me because they like to fight over the bed. And that's the last thing I want is to be laying there trying to fall asleep and having dogs fighting on top of me. So everybody has their own space in their crates. And that helps too because they fight over food. So then they have their own safe space to eat their food, but nobody's going to bother them. So yeah, that's kind of how I manage it. I'm not sure if there's any other specific questions, but drop them in the chat if you do have a question. Someone asked about staying cool. Yeah, so my van is not insulated any more than any normal vehicle. It does have like windows that slide open on the sides and a couple windows that pop out. So I can get a little bit more circulation going in there than like a typical cargo van. But to be honest, the way I stay cool in the van is by traveling to areas where the temperature outside is nice during the day and during the night. I'll usually park in the shade, set up my work area in the shade. And that helps keep the van cool. I do like pull down the blinds and open the windows and things like that. That helps to get some ventilation going. But yeah, I will travel. So in the summertime, I will either go somewhere up at high in elevation where the temperatures are cooler, or I'll head somewhere up north where the temperatures are cooler. I will not go to the beach. I will not go to the tropics. I will not be camping in this area where I live, where it's extremely hot in the summertime. And in the winter, it's fine. Like, even if it's extremely cold with blankets and stuff, we usually stay warm. Try to go to a place where it's at least above freezing at nighttime. But yeah, I just check the temperatures before I go in and make my plan according to the weather, because there's nothing worse than being uncomfortable, and there's not really much you can do about it when you're in that area. For short and long-term food storage, that's another question I got. I will say, as I mentioned last year, I was extremely poor when I lived in the van. So I did not even have any kind of cooking stove or anything to cook with. So I literally just ate shelf stable food, or when I had access to buy food like street food or food from a restaurant, depending where I was, I would do that. Now, as I mentioned, I don't drive every single day. So I am usually set up somewhere for at least a week. So I have with me everything I need for that week: generator, if I need it, electrical extension cords, all the water I need for a week, everything for the pets for the week, all my food for the week. So that looked like me eating a lot of room temperature oatmeal that was just like oats and water. I have a cooler, so the ice would only last for a couple of days. So I didn't buy meat because I didn't trust the cooler to keep it cold enough, but I would buy things like cheese, Greek yogurt, so I could have Greek yogurt and granola the first 2, 3 days that I had ice. Um, Cheese and crackers. I would do guacamole and tortilla chips. I would do like those already, like Uncle Ben's already cooked rice and instant beans. And let's see. Um, I'm not sure if I should answer this other question. Okay. Yeah, so I would do a lot of stuff that was already prepared, and that's basically what I ate. Um, So I didn't have a ton of food storage. I had one of those big black bins, and I would just put stuff in there. I would buy whatever I had access to. I would eat fresh fruits and vegetables too. I would buy those on a weekly basis, like whatever didn't need to be refrigerated. This year, I have a camping stove. I have yet to use it because I have just purchased it. So I'll be testing it out next weekend. I'll be hitting the road for a several month trip here in the next couple of weeks. So I'll have a better idea of how cooking goes and what kind of stuff I actually eat now that I can cook. That will be really nice. I still only have the cooler, so I'm still limited in that term. But I can have more, dry goods like rice and things that I can cook. Got a question. Have I ever been to South Park on my travels? I have not been to South Park. I'm not actually sure where that is, but nope, haven't been there yet. And then the final question I got was, how do I like tips for making ends meet? Well, as I mentioned, I was quite poor last year, so I would just say budgeting, like figuring out where the money needs to go and what's a priority. I traveled really slow. Gasoline is a big expense. Camping can be a big expense. Here in Mexico, it's much more affordable than other places. The most I've paid for a campground was like around $15 a night. There are campgrounds as low as like $2.50, $5 a night, $7, $12. So, obviously you can boondock as well, which I have done also. Um, you can do that to save money. So, camping expense is another expense. Food is not a big expense for me. Um, like internet, cell phone bills, that kind of thing, that can be a big expense for me as well. So, yeah, just like working and doing what I can with the budget that I have. Um, yeah, you do get creative. You find solutions. I find here in Mexico as well, people are more united. People tend to help you out and lend you something or gift you something or just help however they can. So you don't necessarily always have to buy a solution to your problems. It is a little bit more difficult to get stuff on Amazon here. And obviously, when you're traveling as well, to receive packages in the mail and stuff can be a little different than things in the US. So, yeah, you get creative. Sometimes you might have to visit a lot of small shops to find a solution, but usually by being friendly with locals, people will be willing to help you out, tell you where you can find what you need, or yeah, just help you out with the service that you might need. And so, yeah, I've had to run into a lot of kindness, and that helps as well. Yeah, in terms of making ends meet, I would just say I'm used to living in a really cheap way. And even though I don't have to do that anymore, some of those habits still continue, which is not necessarily a bad thing. Um, so yeah, I just make do with what I have, what I can, make the best of the situations. For me, I feel really rich that I'm able to see all these sunsets and sunrises and be in beautiful places and be in quiet places where I'm the only person there and be under the stars and spend all this time outside and go hiking. And for me, like that's what it's all about. So I don't worry so much about the money. Now I have a better job. I'm doing better financially. So it'll be really interesting to see how this summer's road trip compares to last spring's road trip in the van in Mexico because my resources are different. I'll have different gear and just, yeah, I'll just have different possibilities. So anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this live stream and hopefully this answered most of your questions. If you have any other questions, just drop them in the comments and I will get back to you on a future video. Have a great weekend, everybody.